Welcome to Crowd Church. I'm joined today by the lovely Beth.
Hello, Dan. This is
And
nice, isn't it?
There's been a bit of illness, so Beth, she looks amazing now, but she has been a bit...
Yes, well, most of the team
Yes.
have been unwell this week, but I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Good.
Yeah.
And we've had a change of plan with the talk as well, because Ellie, who's meant to be doing the talk, has also not been very well. So Matt stepped in at the last minute, who is also ill.
Yeah.
So,
But we're
Yeah.
going to be fine.
Yes.
We're going to get through this. But just so you all know. But yeah, it's great to have you all here with us this evening and to be together. We're really excited about tonight because we're going to be talking about the environment. It feels like quite a big topic to be covering at the moment. So it's the second part of our Genesis series that we're going through.
yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yes.
I've had a sneak peek.
Yeah, we've had a small
And yeah, should be some great things to talk about. So as always, if you've got any questions, just comment. And then when we come back to Conversation Street, we will endeavour to answer them.
Yes, we will try our best.
Yeah.
We will do our best. But I think he's ready. You know, he's not ready. He's not ready. But we're going to have to pass over to him at some point. So we're going to pass over to the wonderful Matt for our talk for this evening.
The wonderful Matt. It's very kind of you.
I mean it.
Oh, welcome, good evening. Great to be with you here at Crowd, online and in person. Laura's smiling at me, which is always nice. So welcome, it is part 2, right? Week 2 of Genesis, which I'm really excited to be in, actually, the book of Genesis. Right at the beginning, we are talking about the environment. And as you so rightly said, it should be Ellie here who should be with us. Bless her. We are praying for Ellie, who is just a wonderful person. And so you've got me instead, which is just, it is the way it is. So, you know, hopefully we'll be okay, though. Make sure you say hi in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. It'd be great to hear from you. And obviously, got any questions as we go through, then put those in the comments as well, because I don't have to answer them this week. I'm not hosting. Dan and Beth are hosting, so my advice is find the trickiest, most awkward question you can possibly think of and put it in the comments, and we'll make sure they try and answer it. Oh, it's nice when you're not the host. You can get to stitch them up a little bit. So we're going to be talking about the environment. Now, just to be clear, a few ground rules. I am not here to debate climate change. I am not here to pick sides on environmental policies or politics. I am definitely not a scientist. I just scraped by my A-level physics, so I'm definitely not a scientist. Full disclosure, I did work for Tradecraft, which I'll talk a bit more about later. Tradecraft is a company along with companies like Tier Fund. They were foundational in the fair trade movement, and so I got to see what a difference companies can make when they care about the whole supply chain, which we're going to get into a little bit tonight. And so, yeah, I'm not an expert, but I do have a little bit of skin in the game with what I've done. So hopefully I have some well-informed opinions. Not that you really care about those. We're going to look at what the Bible has to say about some of this stuff tonight. So I'm asking you, if you're watching or if you're here in person, I don't know where you stand on the whole environmental thing, but if we can, just put those perhaps maybe slightly contentious political opinions aside, and we'll just focus on the scripture. So like we said, this is week 2. If you haven't done so already, do check out week 1, which is Jack, who gave an overview of Genesis, an introduction to it last week, which was great. If you're with us, you'll know that Genesis is a book at the start of the Bible, and it describes the first 11 chapters, I want to say, are what we... No, that's not what we're focusing on in this first term, because we're talking about Abraham. The first 3 chapters talk about what happens when God creates the earth, and then the fall happens, which we're going to get into again a little bit tonight. And it's God's original creation, right? And the reason we want to look at that, the reason why we're taking a little bit of time out to talk about this tonight is it's important, I think, as Christians, or if you're wanting to understand Christianity, to understand what happened before this event called the fall, what Christians like to call the fall. Because this is where we see God's original intent, God's original design for man, for earth, for everything really. And if we can get our heads around what God's original intention was, then hopefully it can give us some important information about what we're supposed to do today. So we will get to see the purpose in God creating earth, how he set it up, and what our relationship in that whole process is. So I put here in my notes, whether you're losing sleep over carbon footprints or whether green is just a nice colour for your walls and that's just about it, I think you'll enjoy what Genesis has got to say about this. To kind of fast forward to the end, the Bible presents a view, I think, that is neither denial, bury your head in the sand, or exploiting the earth for all it's worth, nor is it the opposite, where it's all panic stations and it's all going to, go calamitously wrong. Nor should we be worshipping the earth like it's some kind of deity. What we see actually is a partnership. You've got God, you've got man, you've got the earth, this sort of thing going on. So figuring out what our relationship with that is what makes sense. So we're going to start with our first big question, Zoe. You can put that slide on. There we go. What does an ancient book like Genesis have to say about modern environmental challenges? And more importantly, why should I even care? Which is a big question, isn't it, really? So I mentioned last week, if you were with us, that Moses wrote the book of Genesis. And for a long time with the book of Genesis, like I said last week, there's like easily 20 different ways to interpret this book. What it is not a science manual. It's not just a nice fable of creation. But when it was written, and when it was heard for the first time, it was massively radical, right? This book was hugely radical. And it was like Moses was dropping a bombshell onto the ancient world's understanding of God. Of everything, really. It really was an incredible book. The Babylonians, for example, at the time, they had what can only be described as a pantheon of gods, which they thought about. And the world for them, apparently, was made from the dismembered corpse of a defeated goddess, which I imagine was brilliant dinner time conversation, where mum and dad had to explain to their kids where the world came from. But when they heard the opening of the Bible, the very first verse, not an easy phrase to say, the very first verse of the Bible says this: "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And this would go against pretty much everything that they believed. As I think it does for most people today, actually. I think it's one of those verses where it just, the simple words, but it really is a revolutionary idea that you've got one God who is creating the earth with purpose and intention. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a byproduct. The earth was designed and built by God. And then after a few verses in the Bible, it says that the earth was good. When God finished creating the earth, God called it good, which was radical thinking. And I think it still is in many ways. God intentionally created the earth and said it was good. And that challenged their thinking. And I'm hoping it will challenge ours too. So the earth is not divine. It's not something that we have to worship. Neither is it worthless, something that we exploit or ignore. It is good, created by God, a good God to be good. It is for a good purpose. There is this idea of goodness, the goodness of the earth. In Genesis 1:26, it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion." That's the key word there. "Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So, dominion. Let them have dominion. What does that mean? So, for I think it's easy to understand dominion almost like domination, right? Sounds similar, doesn't it? I can dominate you, like we've got some kind of cosmic permission slip to do whatever we want to the earth because we have dominion over it, yes. Now, I'm going to do what Jack did last week because, you know, Jack's a bit of a Bible scholar, so I kind of have to take my lessons from him. He went to the Hebrew, and so I'm going to do the same thing. The Hebrew radar. I think that's how you pronounce it, no idea. Is the Hebrew word for dominion. It actually means, it's more like the authority of a shepherd caring for a sheep. So it doesn't mean to dominate. It means, I suppose, like a parent caring for a child. To have dominion, to rule over, to care. It's authority with purpose, or protection with responsibility. However you like it, you know, the two things go together hand in hand. As a parent, I know that. You protect, you nurture. There's a responsibility, right? I am ruling here in one sense, but I also have a responsibility. And so God was trusting mankind with the stewardship of the planet to have dominion over it, to care for it, to protect it, to nurture it, which is, I cannot begin to emphasize how much of a radical message this was to the ears of the ancients. Certainly people like, you know, the Babylonians. It was crazy in so many ways that God would do this. And actually, I think it's still like I said, I still think it's quite a radical idea. So what does Genesis then have to say about modern environmental challenges? Well, actually, I think it's got quite a lot to say. Number one, I think it gives us a framework for approaching environmental issues that can cut through a lot of these sort of modern, very polarized debates. Like I said, the earth is not divine, nor is it worthless, but rather it's God's good creation, entrusted to our care. And I think that simple framework should change, in a lot of ways, how we approach this. So I can't exploit the earth for its profit because it's not mine, it's God's. But I can't worship it, nor can I panic about saving it because it's God's, and God still remains sovereign over it. But I should definitely partner with him in stewarding that creation. So secondly, it tells us why we should care. This, I don't think, is about jumping onto the latest environmental bandwagon or trying to earn points with your eco-conscious mates, of which I have quite a lot, which is great. I think it's about more than that. Excuse me. I think it's about fulfilling, actually, our most basic human calling. I think God is defining in part what it means to be human, and that is we have dominion. We are to care for the earth like a parent cares for a child. It's part of what it means to be human. It's part of how God made us when he created us in his image. So caring for creation isn't just a nice add-on to the Christian life. I think it's part of who we were made to be. Now you may well think, well, that's all good, Matt, but what about economic progress? What about development? Don't talk to me about fossil fuels when I've got to put petrol in the car, or gasoline to our American cousins. I've got to put that in the car to, drive to work, to get the money to feed the kids, and so on and so forth. And I think these are all big questions that are worth digging into. So how should we then, as Christians, approach environmental issues without falling into these extremes? Or to put it another way, I guess, how do we do that whole dominion thing, God? Any clues, please? I don't know if you've I go to the supermarket. I go to the supermarket, and you can walk down the aisles, can't you, where the washing up liquid is, or the wash powder, or all those kind of things. Every single one of them has a leaf on it, or a dolphin. They're green, they're sustainable, claiming somehow to save the planet. We have a term for this now. It's called greenwashing, where companies slap some kind of green packaging logo idea onto their products and make some kind of vague environmental claims without really changing anything. I liken it to putting part of your 5 a day onto Cadbury's Fruit and Nut because it contains raisins. It doesn't really make sense. I wish it did. And actually, we've seen this before. So going back to the story of Tradecraft, back in the 1970s, there were Christian organizations called Tradecraft and Tearfund and charities like that, who kicked off what would become the fair trade movement. And it started as a genuine Christian response to poverty. Christians wanting to ensure that farmers and workers in developing countries got fair pay, a fair price, and a fair deal for the products which came from them. But over time, as so often happens, as big companies saw that they could make money from the fair trade mark, it became more about marketing than it did about mission. And what started out as Christians trying to do the right thing got diluted in just really another badge that companies could stick on their products so they could charge 1 or 2 pence more. It sounds a bit cynical, I appreciate, but it's actually the truth. It all got very diluted down. And it gets to the heart, I think, of this whole debate about environmental issues. We want to do the right thing, but how do we stop ourselves getting caught up in the cynicism, in the corporate marketing, in the spin, and in the genuine concern maybe, are we doing enough? So this isn't about trying to get everything right. It's not about trying to jump on the right bandwagon. This is about trying to do what God tells us to do. So we're trying to avoid greenwashing. We're trying to avoid jumping into all of these things. I guess for me, I'm trying to avoid the pursuit of more stuff at lower prices, which I think drives a lot of this kind of thing. And it's not that I'm against capitalism, but there is this thing about exploitation. So the same God that told us to be fruitful and to multiply and to have dominion also gave us a responsibility to care for his creation. And I don't think one thing cancels the other out. I think they end up working quite well together. So practically, how do we do this, right? I mean, it sounds great, Matt, but genuinely, how do we do this? And so I think when it comes to the big stuff, global warming, deforestation, plastic in the oceans, crazy amounts of plastic in the oceans, they are massively important issues. I think they're super important. I think we should care deeply about them. But what tends to happen is they're so big that it creates a sense of overwhelm. And what we know is if there's a sense of overwhelm, we tend not to act. We tend not to take action because we don't know what we can do. What can we do doesn't really make any difference. And there's this really interesting thing that we see in the Bible, that God tells Adam and Eve in Genesis to have dominion over the earth. And then he puts Adam in a garden. So God started Adam off with a garden, a specific space, a manageable space. And I think there's something quite beautiful about that, because whilst I can't solve global warming, I can tend to my own garden, this sort of space where God has put me, whatever that looks like. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would not form a theology from this, but I definitely think it's an interesting principle. The Lord God, it says in Genesis 2:15, took the man and put him in the garden to work it and to keep it. So God puts Adam in the garden to do two things, to work it and to keep it. So what does it mean to work it? Well, to work it, to cultivate it, to process it, to develop it, to get growth out of it, and to keep it. What does that mean? Well, it means to protect it, to conserve it, and to do that at the same time. God doesn't say, oh, just leave it alone or do whatever you want to do. It's kind of he's working it and he's keeping it. He's tending it and keeping it. You develop and protect. You cultivate and you preserve. It's like God is saying, look, I've made you creative beings. Use that creativity to develop things, to build things, to grow things. But do it in a way that protects and preserves what I have made, which is the opposite of exploitation. I think when we exploit the land, especially the land of others, or when we exploit people, which we've done over the centuries, let's be real, we miss God's original design of stewardship. And exploitation, I think, happens when we develop and keep on developing without preserving. So we have a garden to tend and keep. Now that may be, I don't know, a genuine garden. It might be a local park. It may be a community. It may be that you're just going to be more mindful about how you buy and or how you dispose of things. Maybe it's supporting a business that treats both people and planet well. Maybe, I'm just saying, just throwing this out there, maybe it should be all of those things. Tend your garden. Be faithful in the stewardship of whatever garden God has entrusted to you, whether it's your home, whether it's like me, I run a company, so I am very aware of supply chain issues. And actually, it's incumbent upon people like me to make sure that that supply chain is good and is solid and is fair and is righteous, whether that's here in the UK, whether you're dealing with international companies, same thing, right? But start with the garden. Start with where God has put you. Where has he put you? What does that look like? And what would it look like to be a good steward of that space? And I think this is more than just using less plastic or avoiding fast fashion. They're important things. Because I think when you think about stewardship of God's earth, you cannot take out people. So when I buy something, I'm not great at this, I have to be honest with you, but I'm trying more and more. Sharon is much better than me at this. I'm trying more and more to consider the whole picture. Who made it? Under what conditions? What impact does it have on communities where, that manufacture that product? So I've put here in my notes, there's no point in buying organic soy harvested milk with fresh rainwater for my organic coffee beans grown on the free-roaming hills of Mount Vesuvius if it involves child exploitation or robs communities by offering short-term gain for long-term loss. And I think that's a really important thing, and I think as Christians we have a duty of care there. And the more I work in business, like I say, the more I realize this supply chain really, really matters. And I would encourage you to ask companies that you talk to, that you deal with, you buy products from, how transparent is that supply chain? But what difference does all of this actually make, Matt? What difference does it make if I recycle my tins or buy fair trade coffee? And you know what? On its own, probably not a whole great deal in the grand scheme of things. That's really not the point. I think the point is faithfulness. The point is living as if we really, really believe what Genesis tells us, that this world belongs to God and he has entrusted it to our care. So how we treat it actually really matters. When Adam and Eve were in the garden, as we saw, they were to tend and keep it. But, fast forward, they messed up. And like I said, we had something called the fall, which is where Christians would say, sin entered the world, and it just all goes very wrong very quickly for humanity and for the planet, because it did in fact impact creation too. Paul tells us in Romans 8 that creation itself is waiting for something. It's waiting for God's children to be revealed, groaning like it's in labor pains. Does not sound pleasant, does it? The earth is groaning now, not just because I think of environmental issues, but because it's longing for the day when Jesus will come and make all things new and the sons of God will be revealed. Because that's the bigger story here in all of this. Jesus, who Paul calls the firstborn over all creation, which is, that's a serious title right there. I don't know what number I am. Do you know what number you are? No, I don't know what number I am in that list, but Jesus was the first one. Beth's looking at me like I'm crazy right now. Jesus, through whom and for whom everything was made. This is really interesting how Jesus is tied up within creation, that everything was made by him and for him. He came to restore everything, our relationship with God, our relationship with each other. But I also think this relationship between God and man and the planet. When Jesus died and rose again, there seems to be something Scripture talks about how that impacts and how that is being revealed through the earth. So when we act as good stewards of creation, we're not just following a sort of ancient command in the book of Genesis. We're pointing, I think, forward to that day when Jesus will return and will make everything new. Looking forward to that day. Not going to lie. We are participating in God's story of restoration. We're living now in the light of what will be then. That's really, really powerful. So the media may tell us that the environmental issues are either completely false and not to be trusted, or they're going to tell us it's all about politics or economics or technology. But Genesis tells us it's more about who God created us to be. Not exploiters, not worshippers of nature, but actually stewards, caretakers, partners in God's ongoing work of creation, looking forward to the day when Jesus will make all things new. So like I said at the start, I didn't want to get involved in politics. I do have some opinions. Some of that will have come out. But I think it's really interesting how God set it up at the beginning, that we were to have dominion and that we were to tend and keep this sort of balance between develop and preserve. So I think it's just a really important question to get our head around, and I think it's how we treat the resources that we have. I appreciate is not a straightforward question, but I do think God can be and should actually be at the heart of it. So, what are your thinking though? What are your thinking? That doesn't make sense. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the whole matter? Write those in the comments. Like I say, the more difficult the question, the better. Just go and Google the most complex questions you can about the environment for Beth and Dan. Just put a Christian twizz on it and see what happens. No, seriously though, if you've got any questions, do put them in the comments. I'd love to know what your key takeaways are. But I think that's it from me. I'm going to hand back to the wonderful dynamic duo, which is Beth and Dan. And I'm just going to watch you guys answer some really cool questions. So.
Welcome back. That was a great talk.
It was a great talk. There was a lot in there.
Yes.
Well done, Matt.
Yeah. Lots of things to think about. Go on, Beth. What was your biggest takeaway point?
I thought you were answering all the questions.
I know.
I'm joking. So I think for me, the key thing here is remembering that we are partnering with God in creating for this world. And actually, if you think about the fact that he has created this world for us, he's given it to us to steward, that's actually quite big. Every time I think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's quite a big thing. And actually, like thinking about so we've recently had children, and we borrowed some things from some friends. And I remember with those things, I was so much more protective over them because I was like, these don't belong to me. Yeah. I need to actually take care of these. Whereas the things that were mine, I was like, yeah, draw on that, make a mess, it's fine. And I think it's kind of remembering that of kind of how do we steward the things that we have been given to care for.
I think when you just said that, that's one of the things that I'm conscious to teach my kids. Is that when I'm getting old now, 50 this year. When I was younger, not that we cared about things more, but stuff, if we got given presents or we had stuff generally sort of lasted longer. And with my kids, everything's on hand. Everything's next day delivery. If we break it, so we can get another one, and it's conveying to them more of a sense of importance, because the world we live in, we're part of, aren't we? And it's immediate, but it can be just that. Yeah. Everything's fleeting.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's, as like Matt said, it's not just about, kind of, what am I trying to say? It's not trying sorry, brain. It's not trying to just kind of not develop things and not grow things and not move things forward. That doesn't mean that you're, that like caring for things also includes that. Yeah. But it's protecting and preserving it. Yeah. And I think that's, when we're thinking about the world, I think that's so important, isn't it? Of, how do we protect and preserve this world? But also, how do we grow things? How do we develop things? How do we move things forward so that it works in a way that is partnering with God? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I was, over Christmas, we stayed with my brother-in-law's family, and they bought a nice place down in the countryside, and I was talking with my brother-in-law's wife. It's funny, isn't it? Sorry, an aside, that there isn't a name for your brother-in-law's wife. You have cousins, and they have cousins. Anyway, brother-in-law's. So we were just talking, and she was just saying how she always lived in the city, and just been able to get up and walk in the countryside. I said, yeah, well, I think that's a bit of how we were created, to be in that situation, and it does do something to your soul, doesn't it? It doesn't help, and that's not to take away from city life. We live in a city, and I think I was in my mind. It sort of jumped on to how God. You can take a snapshot, a photo of an amazing landscape. There's nothing that man has created in there. It's some mountains, it's some rivers, and go, that's beautiful. You can also take a landscape in a city where you've got the sky, you've got beauty, you've got God's creation, and then you've got, I would say, God's creation through our skills that He's given us, imagination, design, to create amazing things as well. I think it's just great that He uses His creation in us to produce other things as well. I was like, that's great that He's done that, because it's still beautiful. Even though we've created it as well, and it just sort of complements. Yeah. Can complement. Obviously, we can mess things up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Matt was talking about us all having our own kind of garden space. Yeah. What do you think your garden space is?
That's a very good question.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah. I don't know. I was talking to I'm going to say my hairdresser. He's my friend. He comes to this church, and I was getting my haircut this week, and we were talking about stuff, and just saying how there can be. I loved what Matt said there about the garden, because there can be that scariness. You hear stories of kids at school that are scared of what's going to happen because of what they've been told, with environmental stuff. And I'm not wanting to diminish it, but I don't think personally we should be scaring our children. But I think this garden thing's great, because you can just say, God, the big things I don't know. If there's something I can do, help me with that. But what can I do in the small things? And perhaps it is what I said before about just trying to be a bit more less immediate, a bit more less throwaway with my life, and like Matt said, with supply chains. With my job, I run a business as well, and I install tech, and with that, tech gets old very quick. So it's one of those things that is tricky. So perhaps for me, it's more of it's recycling, it's passing it down, it's I'm just thinking, can I have a business where I try to sell people the best things and then say, do you really need to upgrade? Perhaps you don't need to, because that's my job.
So true.
Yeah, so it's very tricky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Miriam in the YouTube comments said, what do you have your comfort in? What do you find your comfort in creation?
For me, it's actually going to the seaside. And I'm actually quite thankful that we're quite close to the seaside here, and it doesn't take too long for us to get there. There's something I find just quite powerful about standing on the edge of the ocean and just like looking out. I think it just makes me feel quite small.
Yeah.
And I know that sound like really silly, can't it? But it just makes me feel really just like blown away by what God has done and what he created for us just in that moment.
Yeah, I love that. And I wonder if perhaps if you don't know God, or if you don't believe in this creation, you could be standing at the shore and just thinking, I'm too small for all of this.
Wasn't me.
Matt sat down and feedback happened. I'm too small for this. I love in creation that I believe and I feel I know that he's created me. He's given me a purpose, and this world's got a purpose. If you believe in an ultimate Big Bang with nothing behind it, where's your purpose? Where's your hope? And to me, that scares me for other people. I love that I can just rest in that purpose. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, this is a good point from Laura. How do we become more environmentally friendly when the clean alternatives can be so more expensive? And this is something that I particularly struggle with. And I think kind of like similar to what you've said, Dan, I am not a gardener. I really wish I was, because I do love being outside and I love being in a garden and I love being around the green and the flowers, but it's not me. I'm not green-fingered. And so I think that for me, trying to find ways of caring for the environment has looked elsewhere. And I think what Matt said was really important. It's about doing something, and it's about finding what works for you, but it's about making sure that you're faithfully trying to do something, and you're not just like pretending it's not happening and all of that kind of thing. And I guess just trying your best, isn't it? Because I mean, we always try and like research things and be like, oh, is there a better alternative for this and all of this kind of thing. But sometimes you just can't find something that works. Yeah. Or
something that I put down here, that responsibility, I think, depends on our situation. Yeah. And often that's our financial situation.
Absolutely.
I think it's my wife's very much into her organic stuff, and whether that's our produce or things like that. But things like that they cost. And I think our situation, I think we just need to pray about how we steward not just God's creation, but what He's given us with our finances as well. I think sometimes we can look at alternatives, and sometimes we can't, and that is not a problem at all. Yeah. But perhaps it's more in our. It might be in our work. Like I was just looking up before when we were singing and talking. So God said, "Be a steward of the land." And in Exodus, so the next chapter after Genesis, he says, well, when you're planting all your crops, every 6 years, stop planting them. And on the 7th year, leave it fallow. So you just leave it and nothing can grow in there, so that the soil can all get nutrients. The wild animals have got something to eat. People that don't have any money, they can scavenge from it and get stuff. And farmers still do that now. You know, they leave a field fallow for that reason. And I'm pretty sure when communism was in its heyday in Russia, they were just trying to produce as much as they could. And they thought, we can get around this. We can just put fertilizer and chemicals and stuff to stop us having all these fields just not being used. And, well, it didn't work very well. Yeah. So I think just God, He not only tells us to steward, He gives us clues and ideas as well along the way.
Yeah. I love this from Mim. It says, do what you can with what you have within your sphere of influence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Which I think is great. Yeah. Oh, should we have one more? You're like, no. I mean, this is an easy one. What does care for the world look like in your life? Do you have clear things that you do?
I think it's for me, it's just the small things. Like I've said, there's big things with my business, and how can I steer that? But for me, it is I've just got to do the small things, and what can I do with what I have? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, I walk a lot. I mean, I love it. I love just getting out and walking a lot. But we try to be as mindful as possible about using our car as like, if we can. It's one of those, sometimes you just got to, haven't you? Yeah. But we do try and think, oh, can we walk here instead of driving here? And there are like a few things that we do bulk buy. Because we're like, it's better for the environment if we bulk buy. But I think for me, it's also about how I'm kind of raising up my kids. And how I'm trying to teach them of like, this is how you care for the world. Because I think even in the last 10 years, things have changed a lot from when I was a teenager. And it has like, it's really changed kind of the way, the kind of way the world is at the moment. But also just how more aware we are of everything. And there are more options than there were that kind
absolutely.
of... those years ago.
I was just thinking then, perhaps more caring, not scaring.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
We can care because we want to, not just because we're scared, because if we don't do it, everything's going to go, crazy.
Yeah, definitely.
If our attitude is, God's given us this to look after, then that's a lot easier to do and to handle with. And I was reading again this week that we do mess up, and we've had world wars and so many things that have sort of really destroyed the environment. But this article was very interesting. It had pictures of these huge craters in France where the bombs had dropped that are full of wildflowers that had got in there. And they reckon when the Blitz happened through London, 157 different varieties of plants and stuff all started to grow. That I think it's great that God has given us this to look after. We mess it up, but he's put such a resilience in it that other things can come out of that as well. It's just his grace shining through.
Yeah, definitely. Fab. Well, I'm aware of time. That's gone quickly. Yeah. Always does. But yeah, it's been really great to be with you all tonight. Thank you for joining us, if you've joined us online. If you have any questions, if you'd like to connect with us, then hopefully the details will appear soon. But you can connect with us through our Instagram and also on our website. Is there anything else I need to say?
I don't think so. Do you know what's happening next week?
No, I have no idea. Do you? Does anybody know? Matt knows. What are we doing next week? Great. So we're talking about the nature of God next week. We're continuing this series on Genesis, and Steve Connolly will be here with us, which will be great. So
that'll be really interesting. I don't know if Steve has spoken on Crowd before. No, it's the first time speaking. But he's a great teacher, a great talk. It'd be really informative. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you join us next Sunday. We will be here in Frontline Church in Liverpool at 6:30, or you can join us at 7 online.
Great.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. Bye.